you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End of discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change what a partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
My message to any dad, man, first off, know that, yeah, it is a hard job, but it's the greatest job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't change anything about it. Everything you're doing from here on out, if it didn't have purpose before, now it has purpose. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Just be a dad.
Man, it's official, y'all. I officially won sole custody of my daughter. She's 10 years old. We've been battling for years. Yes, fathers can win. Be there for your daughters. Step up, and I promise you, you could get custody, bro. Like, I appreciate everybody who was a part of the process. Man, thank God above all. He's the one that blesses us. And if you stay down, you be there for your kid, and it's no limit to what could happen, bro. Man, we won. We did it. We did it, baby. It's for Real.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And today, what I want to talk about, I have a great guest with me. I'm all about the TikTok streets of what's going on right now. And this brother that I have on posted something saying he got full custody of his daughter. And so I wanted him to come on because I know there's a lot of brothers out there who going through the fight of getting full custody or even get just the opportunity to see their child. And you know how the justice system is set up. You know, we all know it. I don't need to repeat myself over again. But I want to bring some form of hope. You know, even though a relationship doesn't work out, it doesn't make you a bad father. As long as you keep fighting and fighting and fighting, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And this brother's going to share his personal story with me, and he's with me right now. The good brother, Shadi Real. How you doing, brother?
Shadi Real, man. Shadi
Shadi
Real,
Real.
man.
Shadi Real.
I'm doing good, bro. I'm doing good.
Brother, thank you for coming on. The question I ask all my guests before we go into the topic, because I'm all about mental health, and especially when it comes to just men in general. You know, we don't have a platform to just talk about how we're doing. So my question to you, how's your heart?
Man, my heart is great, man. It's like, you just got to take every day and just be grateful for it, you know. Like, a lot of times we get caught up in, the day-to-day hustle, putting everybody else first, as men, we the protectors, we the providers. So we always got, like, stay on go mode. We got to do this, we got to do that, But we just got to appreciate who we are and where we headed, you know what I'm saying? And just, keep a level head above everything, because you can't lead, you can't lead properly if your mind is everywhere and, you're full of depression, anxiety, things like that, So mental health is, number one for sure.
Definitely, and especially going through the court system. And I want this to be an opportunity to share your story, because before we, before before the episode started, I showed the video of you um, talking about how you were able to get full custody of your daughter, and telling dads out there to never give up, keep on pushing, There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So just talk about your journey and your story of how you were able to get full custody of your daughter.
Well, man, it's whenever you said journey, it definitely was a journey, man. Like my daughter's 10 years old, and I'm just getting sole custody of her, and like I was telling you before we started, like everybody's situation different. Some dads they don't need sole custody. Some dads just need joint custody. It just depends on the situation. Everybody's different. Some moms are a danger to their kids, unfortunately. Some moms just using the system, to be better towards the dad and trying to keep him away from his kids, stuff like that, or using child support against him. So it's everybody's situation different. So a lot of people think about sole custody as like the main custody to get, but it's not always the case. Most times the best thing is just a joint custody arrangement, and making it work for y'all situation. But for me personally, unfortunately, the mother of my child, she was more of the unstable type. So um it kind of started whenever my child was young, and her mom was kind of dealing with mental issues, things like that. Whenever she was just 1 years old, you know, it was kind of that thing where, like I was explaining, like you're kind of bitter that things didn't work out, and now you're using the kid as a pawn to, hurt me and stuff like that. So, it's unfortunate when it happens. So, when my child was just 1 years old, I had to, try to figure it out, like, because a lot of times when it happens, I mean, a lot of us don't even know how the court system works. I wasn't even aware how it works, and I'm just sitting there like, man, I want to be in my daughter's life. I'm here, I'm doing everything, but now you're using my heart. Your child. Once you hold your child for the first time, it's like, man, this is my heart, this is my world. And any father that's actually dedicated, and love their child is gonna feel like that. So when somebody plays with that, it's like, man, you're not only playing with my daughter's life, you're playing with my heart, you're playing with me, as a man, as a person, So long story short, I had to, seek out legal counsel, um, and I ended up getting joint custody um, for the whenever she was 1 years old. So as time went by, things kind of got worse over the years. My daughter was involved in a car accident with her grandmother on that side. She kind of deals with mental issues as well, and she was having a mental episode while she was driving, and it ended up being a horrific accident. And luckily my daughter was only 5 at the time. Her bones were kind of still developing, or either that would have been a lifelong injury. So I had been trying to warn her to not keep her out of those unsafe situations, and she never took heed about it, and yeah, my daughter ended up having to have surgery, things like that. So you know other things that happen over time, just like using the court system to weaponize against me, like with child support, things like that. You know when I send my daughter there, she wasn't she wasn't like feeding her, like being that provision for her. And pretty much, like, see, my story, and luckily, um even though we had joint custody from the beginning, over time, because of the mom's instability, I already kind of had my daughter a lot of the time, because once she started school, I was her main stability. So, being able to get her to school on time, things like that, doing homework with her, that was pretty much all on me, and it got to the point where, she would visit her mom on the weekends, stuff like that. I never was the type of person to like be bitter, or like, oh, you just can't go by your mom, stuff like that. It was more of, I want you to be involved with your mom, but unfortunately it can't be, more, and it even had got to the point where my daughter was in distress about it, like not wanting to go over there. She had some little brothers, and her mom was using her to babysit the kids, stuff like that. It was crazy, man. So it was a lot to go into the story, but for time constraint, I'm just trying to just give you some highlights of the story.
No, 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 and
But
I definitely oh, my bad, bro, but yeah, I definitely appreciate that because I think,
yeah,
uh, from this conversation, we're not bashing the mother. Let's get that out. Is that we're not bashing the mother. The court decided to say because of her mental health that she wasn't unstable. She was unstable to, you know, functionally be there for her daughter. So let's. I just want to get that out of the way because you know how people like to clickbait stuff and say, "Oh
yeah,
my God, they're bashing the mother," da da da, and that's not the
right,
case.
right. Yeah, that's not the case at all, man. I'm just outlining, why my situation needed sole custody in the first place. Like I was saying before I even started, everybody's situation different. They got mothers that's unfortunately unstable, they got fathers that's unstable, that don't need to be in their kids' life as much. It's just what it is, man. And it's just the reality of life, bro. If everybody could have it the way, where everybody healthy, I'm pretty sure everybody want that. Because with my situation, and the type of person I'm on, and the type of hustle I have, it would have been much easier to have help in that area to where I could go do what a man could do, and still be in my daughter life, and having more, having more balance, but I had to sacrifice a lot of things and a lot of time to make sure I put my daughter first, and it's just what it is. Real fathers gonna do that. Whatever it takes to make sure your kid all right, you're gonna do that as a father. And that's what we gotta do. That's our mission, and that's what God put us here to do. Protect our kids, man. And that's the main thing we're trying to do here. But just to go back into the story, so um around so it was around 2022 at this point. My daughter was 7, and these cycles that I was explaining kept going on. I even gave her one of my old cars. I had got a new car, so I was letting my baby mom use the car to try to get on her feet and try to see if she could become more stable, like, and that's one thing that's important. Fathers, even mothers who watching this, like, y'all should be helping each other, to stay in each other's, stay in the kids' lives the best way possible. Y'all shouldn't be trying to hinder the other parent from doing their due diligence, even if they're struggling. At least try. you know so that's what I did. I tried everything I could, to make it stable, but she wasn't getting out of school. My child started missing days. She was calling me to do homework, over FaceTime. She couldn't even help her with the homework, stuff like that. So it's like at that point, I'm like, okay, well, it seems like you're not trying. So, I took the car back, and it was some other things involved with it, like she wasn't paying the insurance, stuff like that. But my whole point is I tried to, help her be in the child's life. It's my goal from the beginning never was to sever that connection. So a lot of people think about sole custody and they think about just totally taking the kid away, but that's not what it is. And even with my case now, like, yes, they gave me sole custody, but we're doing it to where we could gradually introduce visitation more and more as time goes by. But anyway, so back to that part, because before I got sole custody, I had to go to court again in 2022. So when I went to court in 2022, I had a lawyer that time as well. And what we did, I kind of was fighting for sole custody then, because my thing was, I'm already the sole parent pretty much. All we doing is putting it on paper at this point, and you know, putting the faith in me that I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure everything stays even without having the stipulations on it. Or you gotta drop it off at this time, or you gotta pick up at this time, even when my daughter don't want to be there. Like, if I'll drop over there, Let her be over there for a few hours. When she's ready to come back, I go ahead and pick her up, and not have a, if a bad situation is happening, I should be able to just pick her up from that situation. Not, oh well, you call the cops and the cops saying it's this time constraint and you gotta follow it. When I know as a father, it's something dangerous going on. So that was my protection of it, of why I wanted to have sole custody. Um, but they ended up just giving me domicile custody at that point. So for the dads who don't know what domicile custody is, so the domicile parent, could make, is making all the final decisions. That's where the kid is going to be designated most of the time, and usually they give the other parent, some slight visitation within it. So that's what domicile custody is. So and that's kind of what we was already doing, naturally. But they just putting it on paper. The court, the main thing with court is they trying to make it fair for everybody. So they ended up giving me the domicile custody, and her mom was awarded visitation. It was like every other weekend. That's how they was doing it. And so a few months went by, and that's where things took a turn for the worse again. Her mom, my daughter's mom, ended up trying to kidnap her. So this way it gets crazy. So yeah, and it just got to show you how our system is set up to help, and but it's like so many leaks in the system that it ended up hurting sometimes.
Right.
So what ended up happening is and I forgot to mention as well, I didn't want to leave that out, for that wreck that I mentioned that my daughter was in. So she was awarded awarded insurance money, and we were told by the courts to, put it in a trust account, basically an account where, nobody could touch it, and she could, once my daughter turns 18, she would be able to access the money.
Right.
And so just to add that in there, so we're still in 2022. It's around November. It was around Thanksgiving time, and basically she put a false restraining order out on me, saying I was abusing her and my child.
Wow.
So the thing about that is um the system don't know what's really going on. They just gotta honor it until you know they figure out what's going on. So I went to try to pick my daughter up, and I ended up getting served papers, and I'm like, oh my god, like what's going on, and it was nothing I could do about it. So and it ended up being during the Thanksgiving holidays. So you know how that go with court. It's like you
Yeah.
gotta wait till after the holidays to even try to get to somebody.
Right.
So man, it was wild, man. She cut off all contact from her or my daughter. She cut the phone off from my daughter that I bought from her for her to be able to contact me. While she's at her mom. So it's like I didn't know what was going on. That was a very stressful moment. And what I did was after that situation happened, once the holidays was over, I stormed. I took the day off. I called in. I'm like, man, hey, I gotta make sure my daughter's straight. We're gonna have to wait. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
look, I went straight to that court. I tried to get in touch with the judge who put the order on. They kept giving me the runaround and basically saying people just can't walk and talk to the judge like that.
Uh-huh.
you know. But I was persistent, and I ended up, getting in touch with the person, while they was on a slight break from court. I was over there for some hours just waiting and waiting, and luckily I was able to get to somebody. They overturned the restraining order and placed my daughter back with me. You know, but in the midst of that, once I got my daughter back, that was kind of traumatizing for her, because
Right.
me being her sole provider already. She didn't know what was going on. She had to be escorted back to me in a police car, stuff like that. And she's just 7 years old, so she's and your children very vulnerable at these ages. You know what I mean, emotionally. So she was asking questions and crying, things like that, like what's going on, and saying her mom tried to enroll her in a different school, saying that you're not gonna see your dad anymore. That's traumatizing to a child. And later after that, I found out that she also tried to basically she tried to steal the insurance money that was for my daughter as well. She
Oh
tried
wow.
to she deposited into the account where she had access to the money instead of
Right.
putting it into both of our names was on the check. So
Right.
the wreck happened in 2020. They had been gave us the check. The thing about it was she had been plotting on it, and both of our names was on the check to sign off. So I don't. That's still the mystery. I don't know how
Right.
she got over that part because usually whenever you go to the bank systems, like you gotta verify, you gotta have your ID. She forged
Yeah.
my name some type of way. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, she so I had to find out what the money was. All it was all kind of stuff. Then once that happened, I didn't feel comfortable with allowing my daughter to go back. I mean, you just literally tried to kidnap her.
Yeah.
So at that point, that's whenever it got to the point where look, we're gonna have to put a halt on this visitation thing till we figure this out. So we had to go to in December, we had to, go in front of a judge for the restraining order thing. So, I was trying to explain to them like what it was, why it was false, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the judge that, was for the restraining order was like, I mean, it's up to her what she want to do. So she decided to, keep the restraining order on, and also, she had told the judge like, look, I don't want to deal with him or my kid anymore.
Wow.
So yeah, that was crazy. And at that point, uh, it was like it was the restraining order was for like a year and a half. So
Right.
for that period, as long as that restraining order was on, I was not gonna allow my daughter to go there because at that point, it wasn't nothing I would have been able to do, you know,
Right.
or I would have had to go through trying to get to the judge if I was able to get to the judge and try to
Right.
overturn it. It was too much going on, because at that point the restraining order was concrete. So at
Right.
that point, it's like, why you even went over there? You know what
Right.
I mean? So it's like it put me in a situation to where it's like we just had to, stop the visitation with her mom, and her mom kind of went ghost. Like every now and then she would contact to talk to her on the phone or something, but it was never an urgency like to see her until 2024. And I told her, I'm like, look, we need to revisit the court system, for this, so Brielle could be protected in this situation because you literally tried to kidnap her. So we need to make sure this is fair and even. Because even then, like I didn't want to like completely. It's like I was in my head. I'm like, well, maybe we could do some supervised thing or something,
Right.
but like it's gonna have to be gradual because I can't risk that again. You
Right.
know.
No, I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah, man. So look, so I ended up it was May 2024 whenever she, tried, like she called the cops and stuff and trying to get the kid taken back and stuff, but they couldn't because of the custody order that was already in place. I was already domiciled. So,
Right.
dad's one thing is, once you do have it, your custody, even if it's joint, that protects you. So don't think that, you're a victim to where, you can't have protections from the court. Like, yes, it may feel like it's rigged against men, but yes, you can get custody to a certain extent, even if it's not so to where, it's enforced, and so I ended up, filing to, finalize the sole custody, at that point, that's what I was searching for. And we went to the hearing officer, and just go to show you how sometimes you got to fight because when we went to uh, the hearing officer basically told me leave the past in the past. Like after everything that happened, she was kind of looking at me like I was the problem. So who you have as a hearing officer or judge is vital too. But again, I had a lawyer again at that point. Um, but it was it gets costly, man. It's thousands of dollars that you're paying for these lawyers, man. And I know it could get discouraging out there, dads. But if you can, like, shoot, I had to put the money on the credit card. Just being real, like I couldn't pay it up all front. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes you got to make sacrifices for your kid, bro. If you know that it's better for you to have a representation, which is always the best route in my opinion. Do that. If you can't, then you need to at least have a consultation with a lawyer so you could know what to expect, what to do. Don't go in there blindly, man. Prepare. You gotta be prepared. Like you gotta think this is your kid's life on the line. So the main thing is being prepared. And so we went in there. Basically they gave us the supervised visitation. You know, and with the hearings, see the thing is with hearings, it's always recommendations. Until that you sign and until you sign and make it concrete. Now, if you don't agree with the hearing, you can always go to the judge, and whatever the judge says with the real, court date, that's whenever it's concrete. So they basically, the hearing officer gave us recommendations, to have the supervised visits for a short time. Then, after a couple months, it would go to unsupervised. So, um, my daughter went through the process and with supervised visits. It's a safe place where with situations that's kind of iffy like that, or if the child may be in danger, you can drop them there, for a few hours, and they'll be able to visit with the other parent, under supervision. They'll have a security person there, stuff like that. So it's even if the other parent it may be a danger, they still have ways for them to visit and stuff like that. So we did that. We went back to the next hearing, and they wanted to go to the unsupervised visits already. That was kind of quick for me because that was just a couple months. So I kind of fought against that. I'm like, maybe we should do it a little more gradual, you know. But they was convinced that everything should be all good. So um, pretty much had to. I bowed down to it, which that kind of hurt because they also had overnights included, and that was something that we were scared about because it's like you do overnights. It's like will she leave my child alone again? Will she try to run off again? Or you got all those anxieties that happen with that. And but the overnights didn't wasn't supposed to start for a few months down the road. So we started doing the unsupervised visits, and it was like just it was like on the weekend, like every other weekend, it was doing like a 10 to 6, and during the week they was doing like a couple hours on a Wednesday, like after school. So, they put that on the visitation terms, and she started missing visits. Bringing the child late on school nights. Just still kind of instability type stuff. Because my hopes was that she could do right again, and maybe this time after everything that she finally wants to be in a career life, do it right, all that. But as we could see, those patterns kept consistent. Um, so at that point, we went back to another hearing. I had to call for emergency uh, hearing because basically to stop the overnights from happening. Because it was still kind of iffy what was going on with the situation. So from there, the hearing officer basically disagreed with me on because like I had it to where she was held contempt because she had turned my child's phone off, and that was one major thing that we agreed on, like keep the phone on so
Right.
we can make sure everything good, and make sure the location stays on, stuff like that, because it was a kidnap attempt, so just to make sure everything good. but she's still turning the phone off, still, doing things like not listening, to the court orders. So, even after all that, the hearing officer was still basically like, look, we gonna keep it the way it is, and there's nothing you could do about it. The hearing officer even told me that you're not gonna get sole custody. So, she was basically saying like, give it up. And not only that, she was like, she compared the stress my daughter was going through. Because at that point, my daughter's like, look, I barely want to go over there. My daughter, expressed to me that like, you know, if I go over there for a couple hours, that'll be cool, but nothing more than that. She, every time it was time for her to go to the visitation, she was, she was like, oh man, I gotta go by my mom, and you don't want to see a kid like that. Then she come back and in a bad mood, like, and or relieved that she's finally back home. You don't want to see a kid go through that, man. Just like I was saying earlier, like mental health, emotional health, that's key to anybody, especially a little kid that's developing. So at that hearing, we was denied, and I almost gave up. I'm like, man, look, at this point, it's no matter what happens, they still gonna favor the mom. They still gonna, even after everything that I explained, it's like at that point, and most people that hear the story, I mean, it should have been a no-brainer to give Miss Sole custody at that point. But hey, sometimes the system doesn't see it that way. But instead, and on top of that, um, if you wanted to go to like this, the thing, so you could have a lawyer to represent you for the hearings, but lawyers are based on hours. They get paid by the hour and how much they feel like it's going to take to have these hearings. But when it comes to the actual court date, you're gonna have to pay the lawyer for the whole day, because there's no telling how long they're gonna have to be there. You could be the last case of the day. So, that would have been thousands of more dollars I had to pay. And at that point, I was burnt out with it. I'm like, look, I know this process. I know my case better than anybody. And I know how this process goes. All I need to do is go in there, be prepared, make sure the judge understands the whole situation, have my evidence together, just like I seen the lawyers do in the past, and just do my thing and go all in and have faith in God and have faith in myself that I could actually make this happen, you know. So that was the point where I walked in with no representation, and like I was saying earlier, like, you know, at that point, I was kind of prepared. I knew how the process went, so even if you don't want to go through that process, dads, you don't have the money, you don't want to spend the money, like I say, at least pay a lawyer for a consultation so you can know how this process goes and how to be properly prepared, and so whenever you step into that courtroom, you're not stumbling, you're not second guessing, and you're getting your point across, so the courts can understand what's really going on, because they listening and they trying to figure out what's the best interest for the child. And as you go through this process, that should be the main thing. Not you mad at the mama and you want to keep her out of life, or the mama mad at the daddy. The intention should stay, keep the best interest of the child at heart, whatever that is for your situation, because that looks different for everybody. So, I prepared. I got the evidence together. I literally exhausted every avenue that I could possibly show them. And another thing, like when it comes to evidence, you're dealing with a parent that's trying to keep a kid away, or trying to say you didn't help out when you actually did. Keep everything, man. Don't delete that stuff. Keep that, because the courts need proof that this is going on. They're not gonna go by he say, she say, all that. You have to have proof of what's going on. And luckily, it was an ongoing process, so I kept everything. Had my evidence together, and I just presented my case, man. And I didn't have a lawyer at all, so like I said, I had to go on faith, man. And you know, like by the grace of God, the judge saw that, I deserve sole custody in that situation, man. So it was a blessing. And when I dropped that video, it's like I walked out of court and I'm like, man, I gotta tell the world because I want to inspire dads, to always fight for their kids no matter what, even if it's hard, even if you got a parent that's against you, even though whatever the situation is, they trying to use child support against you, whatever it is, man, fight for your kid, bro. Don't let the situation deter you from being in your kid's life because a lot of times it could get hard. Like I done talked to other dads, like they like, man, I'm the stuff I'm dealing with the situation and make me not even want to be in my kid's life. I'd rather just pay the child support and just not be there. Man, look, don't let it get to that point, bro. Your kid needs your presence. Money don't equal a father. A father presence is undefeated and undeniable. And I promise you, once your kid grow up, they're gonna be more balanced. They're gonna be more prepared for life, bro. So don't think that money equates to being a father. You need to be present and you need to be there. Doing your best to raise your kid to be, better than you were. That
Right.
should be the goal. You feel me? Make sure your kid be at least try. Because you nobody perfect, man. And if you're a father, if you're a real father, you should want your child to be successful. That's the main thing. So just do everything in your power to make sure your kid is gonna be successful, bro. And everybody go see it. Your kid go notice it. Y'all gonna have a good bond. And if it ever comes to court where you need to, show the courts that they're gonna see that it's gonna be undeniable because you being what you're supposed to be for your kid, bro. So as long as you do that, man, you could get custody, bro. Like
No,
don't ever think that you can't, bro. You could do it, man. Have faith in
no,
yourself. Keep God first, bro, and you could do it, man. Real talk.
no. Real talk, bro. I appreciate you sharing your story with me because I think it's important that dads get that information that don't give up, no matter what obstacles in your way, you know, you got to be there for your children. You have to be there, they want you there, and if they don't see you fighting to be there, they're going to think that you don't care. So my last question to you, brother, is like, how are you dealing with, the trauma that your daughter's going through the court case and going back and forth to home and this and that. So how you dealing um with her dealing with that?
Um, like one thing about me is like I was telling you, like emotional well-being and mental health is of the utmost importance, man. And if you don't know about those things, I encourage you to do some reading on it. Read on psychology, read on trauma. Like a lot of times we don't want to do the work, but we got to educate ourselves on these things. Just because you don't have the knowledge on it don't mean you can't get the knowledge on it.
Right.
If you're seeing your child traumatized, you're seeing your child stressed, like look up things. Like we're in a time where we got information overloaded to us. There's no excuse not to find the information that you need to find.
Mhm.
Google it. It's even AI tell you, pull all kind of information out for you. You don't have no excuse right now. So that's what I did, man. I did the work. I started looking up, questions to ask, kids dealing with trauma, stuff like that. I made sure throughout the process that, I made sure that my daughter felt safe, safe talking to me about the situation, safe expressing her feelings and, just making sure she understood what the process was and why things are like they are, Kids want to understand too, just like us. Just because they're kids don't mean you can't tell them nothing. You know,
Right.
they want to understand what's really going on. And, don't be bashing the other parent. Don't be, in front of them saying, oh, your mom ain't shit or your dad, don't do
Yeah.
that, man. Because them kids, bro, they be confused in that situation and they, going based off of what you saying, and that's not right. Don't do that, man. Let them let the children gain their own opinions and on the other parent. And if they are unstable, they're gonna see that, and that's kind of how it was for me. I didn't have to make my daughter, feel some type of way about her mama, unfortunately, based on the, how she was treated and the circumstances, she gained her own opinion about her mom. And that's important, bro. But I just, like I say, I just made sure I talked her through the situation, make sure she understood why it is the way it is, and she really appreciated that, throughout the process. It was kind of, like I say, it was kind of hard for her at times, but I just assured her that one day everything go work out. Daddy gonna keep fighting for you. And no matter what, we gonna be straight. You know what I'm saying? Just reassurance, reassure them. Because it's confusing. It's confusing for them. And for a kid, your parents, that's your first major connection. A lot of times if you're looking at, as a kid, you look at your parents like they can't do no wrong.
Yeah.
So that's major for a child going through that transition. So make sure you keep that in mind with those kids, bro. Like, they need to be reassured, man. Don't write off their feelings. Don't be like, oh, you don't have a reason to feel how you feeling, or that everything all right, you good. Like, nah. Sit down with them, be soft with them. And as dads, that's a little foreign to us, because we tough. We, especially in the black community, we taught like, oh, you can't cry, you can't, be a man. Yeah, as a boy, be a man, man up.
Yeah.
Like. So it's like, sometimes you gotta be soft with your kids, man. And let them, and build an emotional safe space for them. Like, let them cry, let them talk to you. It's all right. It's all right to be hurt sometimes. You feel me? But the main thing is just making sure they have faith in themselves and know that they can stay strong through anything. And that's all I wanted my daughter to know. Like, through it all, we gonna fight, we gonna stay strong, and we gonna have faith in God, bro. And it's no limit to what could happen whenever you do that. And eventually it happened. A lot of times with God, we want it to happen right when we want it to happen. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
that was the process for me. It's like, man, you're impatient. It's like, Lord, what you doing? Like, cause I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Like, I need you to step in and make this right. You feel me?
Right. Right.
But
Right.
everything happened on God's timing, bro. Like, it was the perfect timing. It's like my daughter 10 years old, she understand better now, and she was protected throughout the situation, because it was times where something could have happened and went left. But God was watching throughout the whole time, bro. And you can't forget that, bro. Even when it looked like he not there, he there.
Right.
Trust me. Just keep
Right.
the faith, keep believing, man. And eventually it's gonna work out, bro.
Facts, bro. I appreciate you for coming on. I think the key thing from this conversation, create that space, safe space for your child. They need a place. Home should be that safe space. And so, bro, I appreciate you for coming on. How can people find you?
Man, look, man, I'm on all the social platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I'm a content creator. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm just trying to inspire everybody out there to be real and be their best selves. Look for me. Type my name in Shadi Real. It's on at ShadiReal. Shadi Real. So I represent the real ones. And yeah, we're gonna level up this year. We're gonna stop playing around with ourselves. We're gonna really level up, It's now or never. It's the perfect time, everything going on in the world and everything. Look, if we ain't got time to play around, we gotta stand up and be the best man that we could be. Not only for ourselves, but for our family, man. So let's
Facts.
do it, bro. 100, real
Facts.
ones only. Let's get it.
Facts. Facts. Again, thank you for coming on. This has been an amazing conversation on the podcast. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we're out. Peace. All right, stay on for 1 second. I'm
Peace.
gonna end the recording.